John Capobianco is a developer advocate at Cisco and former senior planner and integrator for the Parliament of Canada. In this conversation, we talk about John's journey into technology, the current state of network automation, and the convergence of network programmability and artificial intelligence. John Capobianco, how you doing, sir?
Oh, William, I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. I wish I had my own coding with Capo bar lamp, but I'm doing otherwise. Other than the bar lamp envy, I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be here.
You gotta get you one, or you know what you can do is I talked to somebody the other day that made one of these. Somebody that's gotten like really deep into the 3D printing. They 3D print GIFs, like light fixtures, like all sorts of stuff. It's amazing.
Well, I do have
you can
stickers
3D print
now.
anything.
I did go to Sticker Mule and get a couple hundred of these, so I can give
That's
them out
awesome.
at conventions and Cisco Live and things like that. Yeah, I had smaller ones made, but I didn't pay attention to the first order, so I have these little 25 millimeter ones that are like thumbnails. But they were actually a big hit because they fit nicely on your lanyard, and people could put them on their lanyard to say that they've met me. And other people can go, "Hey, it's John. You've met John. Where is he?" Right? Anyway, they're a lot of fun. People really light up when they see the tiny little. I go, "Hey, I've got something for you," and I slip them a little tiny little sticker. Right?
You need to trademark your smile. It's so funny because after Cisco Live this last year, I was doing another event somewhere else, and like I was thumbing through. I had somebody next to me that also works in networking. We're thumbing through all the Cisco Live stuff, being all jealous because we couldn't be there, based on other events and stuff. And we see your, people taking pictures with you. We see that smile, that contagious, like smile. Like, okay, John's out there living his best life. Like, look at him, he's so happy.
Yeah, you summed it up. I'm living my best life. So the selfie thing, okay, one, I am genuinely excited to meet people. Like, I really, particularly that one-on-one connection, and we both look at each other and light up and go, "Hey, I know you from Twitter or LinkedIn," or they know me and I don't know them, or whatever. But when people are taking selfies with me, they can see my face before they take the picture. So why not go like, light up a smile? And then they naturally tend to smile. So that gives them a good photo of two people smiling. I'm not mean mugging it or looking distracted or like I cherish, and then I get to know their story and if they're using my code or if they've read my book or if I've helped them in some way, or or conversely, if it's someone that I'm saying, "Wow, like I'm a big fan of your work and could I learn more about this or that?" Like that Cisco Live is, the sessions are wonderful, right? And everything that you can learn during the week. But it's sort of that filler time of walking from here to there and you run into 10 or 15 different people, right? But
those hallway conversations, they're valuable for sure.
Yeah. But this is always what I always wanted to do. And it's funny, every step of the way I seem to have found a way to work and be employed and make a living off of something that I wanted to do. Like I actually, I started I worked in an aluminum factory for 5 years after I had some problems in university. I was majoring in history. It just wasn't for me. It didn't click. And then I ended up having to go to work to pay off that loan. And I ended up in an aluminum factory, doing 12-hour shift work with boots, steel-toe boots and gloves and heavy equipment, heavy metal, dangerous work, physical, hard work, not very mentally stimulating either at all. I decided to go back to school, and so I worked and went to college until I finished my 3-year computer programmer. I wanted to be a programmer, but as it turned out, my placement in my last year of college was with a service desk. It was kind of like a help desk, but a little bit more. It encompassed a little bit more than just a typical help desk, and networks and desktops and servers and that world of compute and storage and a little bit of networks. I was introduced to networks around that time, but I had trouble getting work as a programmer. I didn't have the 1 year of job placement that typically led people into an organization as a programmer. I had this service desk thing. And so I started to get certifications. I started with my A plus and my N plus. And then at the time, I think my Microsoft XP exam. And getting CompTIA and getting Microsoft Certified Professional. Something about that really like excited me. Like, wow, like I have a piece of paper that says I'm a Microsoft Certified Professional. That's cool. And it's applicable. And XP, yeah, I think that had such an impact on the world. And I did so well as building ghosting images and building desktop images and transferring them, multicasting them over a network. That was sort of the early things I did in my career that led into transitioning. So I got my Microsoft certs all the way up to ITP, which was about 10 or 12 Microsoft certified certification exams. One of them was a network exam, but the rest of them were more Active Directory and COM and DOM and all kinds of different things, right? Everything Microsoft related at the server level. And around that same time, I was moved to the network team because there was a real shortage on the network team. And I was like, I didn't fight them on it, but I was like, I just spent, 6 or 7 years focusing on Microsoft, and I got the highest level of exam that you can get. And you're moving me to the network team.
Those exams are hard too. Those old Microsoft exams. I was going for the MCSE at one point, and they were hard exams. They weren't easy.
No, and you needed a lot of them to kind of level up, as I would say. Like for CCNA at the time, you could write either the 2 individual exams or the combined exam to get CCNA. XP was a single exam, but certain other designations, like the at the time, so they moved away from MCSE, MCSA in 2008 to ITP Professional, and then you had different designations, but they were difficult. But what I liked about some of them was you had 20 or 30 objectives and certain restrictions. You couldn't run the reg editor, and you couldn't reboot the machine. But otherwise, it was like a free sandbox, and you just had to accomplish the 20 or 30 things they wanted you to set up. So that was very challenging. Those were difficult exams. But I think they really prepared me for some of the Cisco exams. Like the T-Shoot exam at the time that I had to write was all simulations. There was 4 or 5 tickets you had to solve. So I had sort of that practice from some of the Microsoft exams.
I remember that one. That was my favorite. So I had gotten the CCNP originally, like on the one or 2 iterations before that one. And going like when they switched it to switching, routing, troubleshooting. I really like that approach. And whenever I would go and recert, I would always take the T-Shoot because it was the easiest out of all of them. I don't like layer 2. I hated switching. So the routing was also, I think I took the routing to recert one time. But
right.
Yeah, I remember that test. It was a good one.
I remember those days. I tried to write something new. So it's funny, after my CCNP, I was going to pursue my CCIE in route switch, but my employer at the time, they asked if I would instead focus on data center, because at the time they were replacing their data center with Nexus, and they needed somebody to know and learn and build and design and support that. So I agreed to that and got my CCNA data center and my CCNP data center. And then during CCNP data center, because then it was kind of like, okay, well then I'll go for CCIE data center. I'll follow that. All the DevNet stuff came out. And I was like, no, I want to do DevNet now. So I got my CCNP data center and then got my DevNet associate. And right now I'm actively working towards CCNP, the equivalent of CCNP, DevNet professional is sort of my next large target goal. So I love certifications. I try to write at least one a year. Take an exam, let's say. Not pass, but I try to at least attempt one a year. And if I do it early enough in the year and get lucky and pass it or do well and pass it, then I try to follow it up with the second exam. Like I really, and that's been 20 years of my career. I have my whole certification path on automateyournetwork.ca/about. If you're curious about my career path or my certification path, I really strongly believe in the certifications. Cisco's got new certifications. I actually work for Learning and Certifications, to be very transparent with everyone. That is my organization within Cisco, is Learning and Certifications. But that was my dream job, especially at this point in my career where, and that's why to tie this all the way back to the smiling and the happiness, and it really is genuine. Like I said, I started it as an aluminum factory worker with limited skills. I went back to school and I've got 2 or 3 certifications a year over 20 years now. And I wanted to transition into helping people learn what I've learned. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think I'm at a point now where I was kind of done with the pager duty and supporting a real live environment. I had done that a very long time. And I wanted to move into education, the education space in some way. An instructor, a boot camp instructor, which is what I actually do at Cisco. So I couldn't be happier. Now I sort of have, I don't know, a little bit of influence out there. And I want people, like new people, and people that want to maybe change their life from being an aluminum factory forklift driver like me to a network engineer. You can do it. And I'm living proof of that. I'm not anything special. You read the books, you get the Cisco Press books, you get other books. And now it's never been easier. Cisco U and the always on sandboxes. Back in my time, I used to go to used bookstores and find the networking section and pick up books, any book that I can in these old used bookstores. That was how I came up through the industry. Oh, wow, look, an exam prep book for the N+. Cool, it's only $10, right?
Yeah, when I first started studying for CCIE, I don't even want to think about how much money I spent on eBay for real gear, because you had
Right.
like the first, when I was doing that, you had like the first iteration of like GNS3, which you couldn't really do like anything layer 2 in. And like when you get into like the CCIE concepts, of course, like the layer 2 that you need to do, you need to actually know what's going on, and you need to have access to real, like real gear to study for it. And yeah, it was so much harder back then to do anything with networking, really.
Well, I was fortunate that that company that moved me from compute to networks, they let me build a lab out of sort of refurbished equipment. I had 2 racks not in the data center, but like in a lab area that we had, the networking team, and sort of where we assembled new servers and things like that. I had a couple of racks full of just throwaway stuff that we replaced, end of life stuff, whatever I could piece together to do it for real as I was trying to get my CCNP. It's funny you mentioned Switch and T-Shoot. Those were good times. Those were good days in my career, achieving those. I wrote Switch first, and then I took a boot camp for Route, and the instructor's like, "What are you doing here? Like, you already have Switch. Route's easy." And I said, "Well, the book is twice as large as Switch." He said, "No, but if you've already got the basics of switching down, you're going to find this easier." And I did. And then T-Shoot, like you said, was probably the so-called easiest of the 3. But it was still challenging. It was still a challenging exam.
Yeah, so you can't take a Cisco exam without it being somewhat challenging.
No, I agree. I agree with that. The format of the exam, the structure of the exam, the depth and width of knowledge you need, it's a real accomplishment. And now I get to make videos on how people can prepare for the CCNA. It's the latest series of videos I have coming out with Cisco. One's already out. We go through each topic, and I go through a deep dive explaining each of the subtopics. I want people to get excited about networking, to get their certifications. I've got nothing against the cloud. I think the cloud is an extremely important augmentation to the network. It's an extension of it. It's just somewhere else to have compute and storage and firewalls and virtualized functions. I don't necessarily see, I don't want to call it even legacy networking, right? Enterprise networking, on-prem data center networking, private clouds. The knowledge is transferable. Or security, probably the most popular thing, right? If you tag security in the description of this video, you'll probably get 10 times as many hits. Everyone wants to be a
I'll remember
hacker.
to do that.
I don't know why, but everyone wants to be a hacker. Everyone wants to be in a white hat or a red hat or a black hat or a purple hat, whatever kind of hat they're wearing today. That's really exciting to people. And I'm trying to maybe say that network engineering is just as or equally exciting, if not important. You can even use, say, 5 or 7 years in the networking world, really learn it, really get some certs, and then go excel in the security space. Because you're going to be coming from a place where packet captures and routing tables and whatever is not, or access control lists and firewalls and, right? All of that is part of networking as a discipline. It's baked into networking security. But if you do, say a decade of networking or 5 years of networking, security, yes, then there's some really attractive opportunities further down the road in the security space, right?
Yeah. And back to the smile and the persona that you have, like thinking it, like if I was like early in my career when I had like, okay, you didn't really have social media the way that we have it now. And you didn't really see, okay, like, oh, like that person out there, I'm going to, they make this look exciting. I'm going to get excited to learn. You really just had on the job, experience.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard to, like if I would have had someone like you, back when I was getting going, it would have made life a little bit easier. I would have been more excited and probably more motivated out of the gate to, get moving with stuff. So, yeah, keep up the keep up the excitement and the personality. It's great. And speaking of, like, when did we first met? I don't know if you remember. We were both presenting at Ansible Fest. And I think one of us reached out to the other, and we just started chatting. This was like back in maybe 2018 or something. Do you remember that?
That would have been around that time frame. Yeah,
yeah.
I do remember that. Yeah, and it's great to, like, further down the road, you literally years later to see you having a podcast and to be on here as a guest. The Ansible days were very good to me, and I loved Ansible. At one point in time, I don't know if it's ignorant or not. I look back and I say, I used to say you don't need to know anything other than Ansible. Like, that was a quote from me in 2019-ish, right? And maybe there's still some truth to that. You could run and effectively automate a network with just Ansible. Like, it's a very good tool.
Yeah.
But in my own journey, I was not pressured into, but just the way I am, curious about exploring new things and trying new things, I decided to try to learn some Python with PyETS. And my position has changed drastically. That PyETS or Python is a better approach at scale and for speed and performance and for a variety of reasons. But that's not to dismiss Ansible. Like, we have tools. We have a toolkit. And sometimes you need a circular saw, and sometimes you need a hammer, and sometimes you need, do you know what I mean? Like, there's an appropriate time to use Ansible or to use PyETS or Terraform. There's many new options that we have, or Nornir or Napalm, or, right? Like, it's not limited to just Ansible, I would say, anymore. In the 2017-2019 era, we were sort of getting away from Salt and Puppet and Chef and that sort of toolkit. And Ansible became, like, super accessible, super easy. All you need to know is YAML. And YAML isn't something you need to learn. It's just structured by spaces and indentation, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, man, there's a lot I want to actually ask you about what you just said. I'm going to wait, though, until we build up on some other things, because there's a lot to unpack there. And I got a lot of personal experiences, too, which are, I think, pretty similar to yours. But one thing I want to ask, one thing I just want to give you a shout out for is this coding with Capo is absolutely awesome. Like, the first episode, you're like, you demonstrate everything from, like, generating the open API key, like in the portal. You throw in version control. You're setting up the Python environment. You're also you're explaining, like, each line of code pretty much as you're throwing it in there, that's like the best for me learning anyway. That's the best way for me to learn, is by doing. And then, then the second episode you roll in and I think you created some branches, you're like versioning a little bit, and then you're taking Python to the next level. You're, modularizing it. You're throwing in some functions, and then, I think it was Google text-to-speech or something on there.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay, this is getting really creative. And then the third episode, you're like, oh, I work at Cisco. I'm going to do, create a WebEx space programmatically and, shoot these answers from GPT straight into WebEx using like API calls and things. And I was just like, wow, this is really useful content. It's much different than what I'm honestly seeing a lot lately out of the AI space, which is a lot of folks. So it's funny. I'm just going to throw this in here, unplanned, of course. You asked on Twitter the other day, I think a few days ago, like, okay, given where you are with your journey or your skill set, I forget how it was worded, but would you rather be the first to do something or the best at doing something? And I thought, wow, that is like such a great question, because of course it's a nuanced question, but at the same time, like, you have all these folks that are just pouring out, like they're the first. Oh, like, I want to put out the first videos of this in Chat GPT, so I'm just going to come up with whatever garbage I can, get it out there and try and get views and followers and, build a brand. And with AI, like, this is happening at such a faster pace than anything else I've ever seen in tech. But then you come along and you're really like putting together quality material that network engineers can actually digest and follow along with and reason through, which is awesome. You can't beat it. So major props on that.
Well, that means a lot to me. That I'm having an emotional response to that, because that's what I was trying to do with the Coding with Capo, is I really want it to be like you could grab your kids and sit there and watch 20 minutes on YouTube, and maybe those 8 to 12 to 17-year-olds would maybe be inspired to go learn Python because they want to use ChatGPT because it's the coolest thing. ChatGPT is so I'm an anglerfish here, dangerous in the background, and artificial intelligence is my light bulb right now. So everyone's drawn into the AI, and then I sort of attack. But honestly, I've been doing this for years now. Blender and Django and Elastic, and just all these different approaches and tools we can use with networking. And it's been fun. And it's kind of like, what's really going to break through to people? And then AI came along, and I just picked it up, and maybe we can talk more about the AI, but the reaction to that, to your point of you've never seen anything growing faster. I mean, I'm from instead of dozens of views, thousands of views, tens of thousands of views. The David Bombal video that we did is over 50,000 views now. And that's just from Cisco Live. It's like 12 weeks ago. It's 50,000 views already on his channel. So AI is, I mean, I will go out on a limb. I think it's like penicillin or the printing press or the H2 rocket, or like, I really think this is a societal changing inflection point in history where there's going to be a pre-AI society, like a pre-automobile society, right? Like there was a horse and buggy days. I look at the way certain people are approaching problem solving today, and it's like they're still using the horse and buggy, right? AI, post-AI society, I'm telling you, it's going to integrate in every single human's function. I think across every vertical, horizontal, in every enterprise is going to want their own private AI, their own LLM. Much like everyone used to have, let's say, an exchange server. An enterprise was not an enterprise in the world in 2001 unless they had an exchange server and they were doing email. You just had to have email. And then, yes, Google came along and Gmail came along and other alternatives to email came along. O365 comes along in the cloud. You get my point. Or a mainframe in the 1960s to 70s. You had to have a mainframe if you wanted to do business and compete. I equate that today as you have to have an LLM on-prem that you can use privately. You have to have maybe filters or acceptable use policies to enable people to use OpenAI as a tool. But there's some danger there. It's a cloud service, and who knows what they're doing with that data. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to run it in your own cloud as a service or on-prem in the data center, right?
That's such a good point. And that's back to something you said earlier about, like, I think you were like, yeah, I love cloud, but blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I did a U-turn. Like, I've been hardcore network engineering, like ripping out like Cat OS and Cisco CSS and like all these things, going through the Nexus transition, spine and leaf transition, automation all the way with everything I could automate. But one thing that it kept beating me up like year after year is like networking it's always like quote unquote the problem. And it felt like I was always fighting fires. Like I had these ideas of grandeur, not even ideas of grandeur, but like, hey, I want to do the right thing here. And I'll compromise, but the compromise would end up being like, $5.95 or something, so not much of a compromise. So that's when I started trying to do something different in cloud. But here I am working for a network startup in the cloud. I'm still hardcore networking. It's like if you grounded, or you grinded in networking really hard for a long time, that just seems to be where you sit. And yeah, it's just one of those things. And I think AI coming in, like what you said about, building your own versus like, this stuff is expensive. Hardware to run all this, like we'll get into the pricing maybe later for like OpenAI and tokens, but doing your own private one on premises, I don't think it's a zero-sum game like moving to cloud. If you're a big company, you're going to have your own data centers for a long time, for the foreseeable future.
Right.
But you also may use cloud. You may use some SaaS, services out there. You may use other things. It's flexibility and, having a competitive advantage or creating a competitive advantage for your business and your market to do well by doing what's right and hosting the right application in the right place, yada, yada, yada.
Right. Yeah, and it may end up as a cloud service for your own enterprise, or it may, I just don't know, given the volume of tokens and egress data, I don't know that that's a good place at this point in time. But yes, on-prem, to your point, yes, you're going to need, UCSX servers with A100 cards from NVIDIA or H100 cards if you really want the higher end. There is no, and then the high bandwidth networking to support the throughput. It's a next gen. I was reading a Forbes article. If anyone wants to find it, just Google Forbes 76 billion data center AI. Add that as a keyword search. Forbes projects $76 billion in on-prem data center spend to support AI operations between now and 2028, I think it says in the article. So over the next 5 years, $76 billion in on-prem spend to support.
I just found that article. I'll put it in the notes.
Okay, I'll put it in the notes.
For the show.
Good, cool. It's an excellent article.
Yeah,
it's an eye-opener. That's 3 times the operating costs of AWS as a whole, to give you some perspective.
Yeah. And that's like you said, these, like the H100s, I think are like 40 grand a pop or something crazy. Like they're very expensive.
Oh yeah. But if you could take, every employee, let's say on a bell curve, and reduce their individual jobs by X number of hours, like I know it myself. Something that used to take me, call it 3 weeks to whip up a proof of concept. I'm whipping those proof of concepts up in hours now, because I'm just using AI appropriately to help me generate my demo code and stuff, right? Or troubleshoot issues is a very good use. So what, in terms of network engineers, or this kind of ties into the cloud thing. It was fairly stagnant as a career path. You got up to CCIE level, you master all these CLI commands, and you're a good keyboard jockey device to device. somewhere along the way, this DevNet approach came along, and now it's more like software development. Now it's more like a discipline, and our tool set has exploded, right? X number of years ago, call it 2015. At some point in my life, I started to have to know Git and really understand Git and branches and merging and GitHub and GitLab and pipelines. That in itself is a skill set that was foreign to network engineers up until, and I'm still trying to evangelize it. Some network engineers still are not using Git. And I picked that, one, because it's a foundational thing, but there's also Docker, there's also Jenkins, there's GitLab, there's GitHub, there's Azure DevOps. And then we talk about languages. There's Python, there's Go. And then within those languages, there's different frameworks. Then there's domain-specific languages like Terraform and Ansible. So the network engineer of today is way, way different than even 5 years ago. And I expect that now to have this layer of artificial intelligence kind of stacked on top of all of that as we continue to grow. So the network engineer of tomorrow to the next 5 years is likely going to be going through the AI craze and revolution in all of their tool sets, right?
Yeah, you said saving yourself some time with generating demo code and things. Like I've been testing ChatGPT since, I think the first 2 months it was released. I got in and started, going in hard and just trying to, honestly, like I wrote a few blogs about, just going into them. I was like, I'm going to try to get this to fail. I'm going to see what it takes to get it to fail. And it took, like I was doing stupid stuff, John. I was taking, I have these Perl scripts that I wrote back in the, long time ago to automate CSS load balancing stuff. And I'm just like, okay, or not CSS, this was F5. So I go and I'm like, hey, convert this script to Golang, but do best practices or something, and it does it. And it runs. It actually works. And I'm like, wow, this interpreted my old, just atrocious code that was written so long ago. It was my thing was from batch scripting straight to Perl, and it understood and it actually transposed this thing perfectly. That's very impressive, because when we were doing this whole thing at this company, we were using Perl exclusively, and then Python really started getting popular, and we started saying, hey, what are we going to do? Let's start doing everything new in Python, but we want to maybe try to transpose the old valuable stuff to Python, and it was not an easy feat doing that with the human brain.
But today, you could likely, obfuscate anything, obviously, that's private or proprietary, but say, here's my old Perl, could you give this to me as Python functions, right? Part of that but you kind of summarized it. You just said, tried to break it. A lot of what I'm doing is the art of the possible. What if, right? To answer the question of, what if I could get the show logs, right, as text, and then put them into a lang chain with a text loader and vectorize it and then chat with it? Are there any anomalies in the syslog? And it goes, yes, at 3 a.m, this thing happened, or there's an anomaly here, or no, there are no anomalies. And that just starts as a thought exercise, right? So be creative, everyone. What if it could do this? You're going to be, I believe, shocked at the results. It basically stands up to everything that I've tried it. There's a couple of edge cases where it says, I'm an AI and I can't do that yet. But generally speaking, it holds up to the job.
Yeah, I think the thing that it does sometimes that I've noticed is, I had written some, I was having it write some Terraform to see if it could write good Terraform. And one thing I realized it was doing is it was putting in AWS availability zones that didn't exist, the quote unquote hallucinating. We're just going to put these AZs in here and this doesn't exist. Okay.
And do you find it's confidently wrong? I find that sometimes very confidently wrong. It doesn't know Yang models for some reason. I've tried to do some Yang or RESTconf, or could you generate the endpoint in Yang for OSPF v3, something like this. And it confidently goes, yeah, here, use this URL. And I paste it into Postman, and Postman is like, this is an invalid URI, right? Like, that's not good. So then you tell it that, and it will say like, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Now that you say it, that is not a valid URL. Try this one instead. It's just remarkable. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so too. But one question that I wanted to get to in our conversation is, I find really interesting, but Chris Grunderman and Scott Robon founded this network automation forum to basically ask this question of why haven't we seen full adoption of network automation yet in the enterprise? And their inaugural event is coming up this November, AutoCon 0. Why do you think that network automation seems to be so behind in the enterprise while like other technical disciplines seem to, like especially compute, really data, even like data stuff, seem to just excel?
Well, I saw that, and it's been thought-provoking, and that question has been with me. So I started in 2015, my network automation journey. And in 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, it's always been like, no, this is the year. It's almost like the Linux desktop, right? Network automation has almost become sort of the Linux desktop, where this is the year of network automation. Jeremy Schulman talks about this, my inspiration and hero and one of my mentors in Python. He's an incredibly brilliant man. He feels, and I sort of echo him as maybe his, Socrates to his Plato, that the next 5 years, it's undeniably going to become the de facto way, and people are going to adopt it. And I think maybe it's an aging out process, because if you think about the student in high school right now with aspirations to work in networking, they're learning Python in school now, right? They're just in the upper years of high school, early years of college or university. They're going to be exposed to Python. And that's true probably since about 2015 or so. So now that these people are entering the workforce, these men and women are entering the workforce with programmatic skills. That's what differentiates me. I went to school to be a programmer, not a network engineer. My formal education is in 3 years of programming, everything from COBOL and CICS and JCL, from legacy languages to Visual Basic, C++, Java, HTML, a few other languages, CSS. So it was natural to me when, hey, Python, you can use Python to configure networks. It wasn't that hard of a transition for me. I think people that studied to be pure CCIEs, they've never seen anything but a CLI. It's hard to suddenly overnight say, by the way, here's 30 new things you need to know and be proficient at, because these are the things that's going to operate your network and cause outages if you get it wrong. That's a daunting task to say, suddenly I have to put down everything that I've invested my skill set into and learn, start from scratch, start from hello world with Python. I don't think it's that's part of my mission with the content that I put out, my videos and everything that I try to do, is to just try it. People, you have to just try a simple Ansible and start with facts. That's why I love this business ready documents. I'm really big on that. Taking network state and making a CSV file out of it. It's very powerful. It really is. But it's safe. You're not changing anything. You're reading data either through a parser or an API, and you're translating the JSON into CSV. Start there, honestly. But I think,
and that's the best thing you can learn with a general purpose. I mean, that's what you do with these any language. You're taking some sort of inputs, you're manipulating it somehow, and manipulating it is the hard part. And then you put it in something, or you do something with it. But that read-only part of being able to understand and manipulate data that's coming in and like normalize it somehow, that's actually the hard part.
Right.
So working through that, it's great experience for whatever language you're trying to learn.
Well, and Jinja templates sort of abstract and make that middle piece of translation. Because I guess if I took a step back and I didn't know any programming, and I hear John say, oh, all you do is just get the JSON and turn it into a CSV. Maybe that's a little bit arrogant for me to say it that way, but it really is not that hard. You're going to use, PyTS or Ansible. Get the show run as JSON or show version as JSON. Run that through a Jinja 2 template that you're going to make a comma separated values file. So a header row of your columns, and they're just comma separated, and then a for loop for maybe interfaces, or if it's show version, there is no for loop. The actual keys from the JSON as the second row, save that as a CSV file, and then look at it in Excel. You can sort, search, filter, find. It's wonderful. But as for why it hasn't happened yet, partly, I think there's a lot of things going on here. There's not necessarily going to be a salary increase or a bonus or a celebration or a parade for network engineers that have learned automation. I don't think that that's a thing. Yes, it's easier to do. Yes, it's better for you and your enterprise. Yes, it's a better skill set. And it really is about the quality, not just about going fast. Oh, I want to push a VLAN to 100 switches. Well, you can either log into them one at a time, in some change window at Friday night at 3 a.m, and make sure you're on the right device, and make sure you've got the right VLAN command, make sure you save the config, whatever it is you've got to do. Or you could write a script in a variety of languages to do that in minutes to seconds to minutes, right? But what's the incentive to do that? To learn how to do that skill? I'm not going to make more money. Sure, it's going to make some people happy. Maybe you might get a little bit more money. The other thing is culture is hard. The code is easy. What we're describing here, code, is super easy to do. But there maybe is 15 years. Maybe your shop just went through the agile transformation and everything's agile now. Or maybe you're an ITIL shop and everything follows ITIL practices. Maybe there's some baked in mixture of chemistry that your enterprise uses for change management and asset tracking and IP management, and you know what I mean? Every enterprise has their own sort of solution to running and operating the network on a day-to-day basis. That culture is hard. Well, now I want to run a script that's going to change 200 devices. Well, who wrote the script? What does the code look like? How did they test it? Did they test it? What do the test results look like? Or were there any problems? How are you going to back out of this on one device, every device? You know what I mean? Like, who is even capable and qualified to review your Ansible playbook if you're the only one that knows Ansible? At some point, someone's got to be first. And then you sort of have to rely on your colleagues to say, well, unfortunately, I need you to learn something about Ansible because I need a second set of eyes on this code. It works and I've tested it and here's my results and everything. But, the hit by a bus factor or, whatever the reason is, it needs to be a team effort, right? So I think culture is slowly moving. The larger the ship, the longer it takes to course correct. So I think smaller enterprises have probably adopted network automation faster than very, very large scale network outfits. But I would stand by the next 3 to 5 years. It will be a required Ansible or Python or whatever. People are not going to be interested in CLI wizards anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, those are some just really good points to kind of segue into my next just sort of line of thinking here is, we talked earlier about wanting to dive a little deeper into like general purpose languages versus like orchestration, like some tool like Ansible or Terraform. And I know this firsthand. Like I used to be like 100%. We're going to build it ourselves with like Python or Perl or whatever. We're not buying anything. We're going to do this. and my views slowly change depending on the organization that I'm working with. Like, okay, like I actually need something, kind of like you're saying, that everybody can contribute to. Not everybody, but you have a few folks that can contribute to, and something that you can get through like the change management, you know, change advisory board, because kind of some of the points you outlined are all resulting from how change is controlled within a company, at the end of the day. So what are the trade-offs in the context of these big enterprises, that they should consider when deciding, at least on the network side, general purpose language or orchestration tools, or both?
Right.
Like, I see a lot of debate about that on the internet. I just kind of want to get your idea.
I think that there is something to be said for having the support of a large organization like Red Hat or HashiCorp behind your solution, right? Or Cisco, if you want to get NSO from Cisco, an orchestration tool, right? There is something to be said to having a support chain and well-established documentation and a good framework, people you can escalate to, people you can get code from, people that have specialists like me in a certain area. There is something to be said for having all of that. And that's appealing to the enterprise. One throat to choke, right? Or someone else to blame, or at least someone else to help you. But I think there's a difference between maybe the enterprise thinking and the thought leadership of the enterprise. Should we let our team build, or should we buy? And it depends on their skill set. I think that building, I sort of can come from your mindset. We can build this. We don't need to spend money on this. We can build it. We can secure it. We can version and source control it. All these tools are open source and available to run on-prem or in the cloud, depending on what you want. But it also, there's a reason why Ansible's popular or Terraform's popular, and their representation as YAML. Infrastructure as code, to me, it's not even code. It's YAML. That's not code, right? It's almost a misnomer, infrastructure as code, when you apply it to Ansible, because Ansible's not really code. It's abstracting the code with YAML, which I have in practice. If I sent 50 network engineers write an Ansible playbook or my PyTS script, I would guess most of them could read the playbook over the Python script. But that is sort of that demographic changing. Maybe in 3 years from now or a year from now or whatever, people will have an equal understanding of either file, right? Because they have some Python experience, and it's really not that complicated, a PyTS script in Python. I don't know. What do you think? Yeah. What did you land on? And the other thing is, I love the Ansible people and the tool and the people that use Ansible. Terraform as well. Terraform for ACI is becoming extremely popular. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I've been suckered into... I'm such a big fan of Terraform, mainly because of like how it handles state. And like, if it's one of those things though, that it's got an Achilles heel, which is state as well. If you don't think through what you're going to do with it, and you start off with bad habits and practices, it can, get out of control pretty quick. But if you just pause and, take some basic steps as you're getting started and do a little work up front, you're going to end up with a really nice scalable infrastructure that you understand the state, like what is desired, what is operational. And I really like it as a tool, but I also really like Ansible. Also really like Python. And my thing has always been, it's been like when I was like in a director role, like my goal was always, okay, whatever we do, whatever my practitioners do, operations has to understand it and they have to be able to support it. If they don't, we have failed. So depending on what our operations, how big our operations was, like if they're actually technical or non-technical, or they catch and dispatch, knock, whatever it is. So like knowing your organization is just gigantic.
Yeah.
And from there, hey, if the most we can do is some basic, because when you get into Ansible and especially Terraform, you can actually loop and do like coding like things when you get extremely advanced, which almost turns it into a programming
Yeah.
language. And then you get to thinking like, why am I even doing this if I can write like these loops and do these things in like Python or Golang?
You've just nailed it. You've nailed it. The complexity of Ansible is simple until it's not, right? Ansible is simple until you say, well, now I need a nested for loop because I want to loop over devices and then interfaces in devices and then sub interfaces. Now you've got 3 levels of nesting, and you have to do it the Ansible way. In Python, you go for space space for space space for. You've got 3 for loops. They're nested. Then you're done. It is actually harder than Python, depending on what you're doing. If you're just getting Ansible facts and writing it to a file of JSON, yes, Ansible's the right tool. If you need to do a for loop for anything, well, then maybe you should learn Python. And also as an individual practitioner, I mentioned the enterprise level and what people have to think about. I think as human beings, as individuals, we want to have the most applicable skills that we can at a wide variety, right? How many job openings right now say they're looking for Python versus looking for Ansible or Terraform? I mean, there's some pragmatic, practical things that maybe you should do some investigation up front to see what's more in demand right now. What is going to accelerate my career, as well as being a good tool, because they're all good tools. There's no real bad one. They're different, and they maybe have different applicabilities. But where do you want to spend your time? Because you have a day job, you've only got so many time, you've got family time and weekends, and there's only so much time to learn a new skill or read a book. Are you going to read a book about Ansible, or are you going to read a book about Python? What has more value to you and your current position, right?
Yeah. And regardless, I mean, my own opinion of the matter is, even if you're a Terraform or an Ansible shop, you owe it to yourself to learn how to code at some level. Because, like, let's face it, using like pandas and Python is like not rocket science. Like, if you can watch a video to learn how to use Excel,
right,
you can do this.
Right.
It's not that hard. So
I think my ultimate message is anything is better than nothing. Any of the above that we've talked about, even some obscure tool, is better than doing it by hand, device by device, line by line, CLI by CLI. I would argue that anything that we've mentioned is better than nothing, right? So start somewhere, and maybe your journey will be like mine. I did Ansible for like 4 years. That's all I did, and it was incredible. And then overnight we pivoted and said, actually, let's become a Python shop. We all agreed to it. It worked out for everyone. And we migrated our playbooks to Python. It wasn't that, it can be a journey, right? And then I'm sure if I was still there, that same shop is now learning Terraform, right?
Yeah. So I love this. This conversation's been so great because a lot of the theme has kind of been around like learning and just continuing to learn and liking to learn. I think the more you do it, the more contagious it gets, and you build habits around it, which is why you keep progressing. But like, I gotta say, like, the AI stuff is a little bit different. Like the training and like how like I can go and basically try pretty much any product out there if it's a software product for free for 30 days, and some of them have like a free tier that you could just continually use. With all the cost behind these learning models and all that's associated with it, nothing is free these days, of course. So these GPT models process text using tokens, which of course you have to pay for. Is there a correlation between words and tokens? This seems like it's very expensive. How do you go about trying to learn it?
So,
if you don't have extra money to throw
around. I have
around?
good news for you. There is a way yes, OpenAI costs at a few different levels. One, to become a GPT Plus user to have access to GPT-4, which is the best model around, period. There's a reason why they can charge money for it. It is the best. But it does cost $20 a month US to get access, and then your API calls or your token fees are on top of that $20 a month access. And this can add up if you're doing development work like I am. The other thing is if you need embeddings. So I mentioned LangChain earlier. LangChain lets you take, say, a PDF and you can chat with it, or a YouTube transcript, or a CSV file, or a JSON payload, and you chat with it. In this LangChain, one of the processes is something known as embeddings. And embeddings, OpenAI has an embedding service that again costs you money to use. And then there's the LLM portion to actually chat with that PDF is a second cost in more tokens to ask the prompt. Now, I think everyone listening and who wants to start with AI but doesn't want to spend money or even use a credit card at all, you should start looking at Hugging Face models. So if you go to Hugging Face, the website, think of it this way. It is GitHub except for models, AI models, not just LLMs, models. So when I talk about embeddings, there is an Instructor XL model that I can get clone locally and point my embeddings code to that model. So now I've saved the cost on embeddings, and it's private and secure and local to my machine. Then I get, say, Llama 2, the 13 billion parameter model for the LLM. I do the same thing. I clone it from Hugging Face, and I point my Python code to say LLM equals Hugging Face, whatever model that I've downloaded. So now both my embeddings and my LLM are local and free and private and secure. Some downsides. You need NVIDIA hardware locally. You need a good high-end computer because this really, my computer's not high-end. It's a few years old. It was a pretty good computer at one point in time. It's a couple years old now. It literally goes, wham, when I start doing my AI work,
Do you have Mac or Windows?
It's a Windows box. And okay. I'm doing it inside of WSL2 Ubuntu. So it's actually in Ubuntu in WSL2. And with the embeddings, you can say use the NVIDIA card using CUDA, C-U-D-A. So, and then even for your LLM, you can tell it to use your local NVIDIA card. So I'm actually using my graphics card, not my CPU, locally when I'm doing embeddings and when I'm doing LLM work. So don't let cost actually drive your innovation, because it drove my innovation. I hit my monthly maximum on OpenAI cost. You could put a hard limit. So I said, okay, well, I don't want to stop working on AI. So I've got to figure out a way how to do this for free. And that led me down the Hugging Face rabbit hole. And like anything else, with a little bit of trial and error, you'll figure it out. And now I'm able to do it for free locally.
Awesome. I'm making notes here. I'll put these links in the show notes. Really useful. Yeah, and that's great. That's exactly what I think a lot of folks want to hear is they see how expensive it is. They don't want to, shed the cost for anything right now. It's a tough economy.
What they want to expose. So that's a double edge. There's a silver lining on that too, is that, well, what if I want to do LLM work with my taxes? Or my weekly budget, or something I may not want to share with a third party like OpenAI, or work stuff. I want to introduce AI at work. How can we do this? Well, we can find open source models, host them on compute in our data center, and now offer AI as a service to our enterprise, privately and securely and for free. So this has many applications, and I'm really glad that you brought it up, William. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, for those listening in, you can buy a NVIDIA, a high-end graphics card, and just buy a bay for it and connect it to a MacBook, a Windows PC, or whatever, and use it for these types of things as well, and give your performance a nice kick.
Is that what those ports are on the back of the PC? I can just plug in I'm going to have to go shopping.
Yeah, this USB, it's great. You can use all the different... I know some folks... I first started seeing this with somebody I know that games. They started parting out their gaming machine, and they're like, I just want to run everything from a laptop. So they got a high-end Windows laptop, and then the graphics card, of course, ages out. And they're like, I'm going to buy a nice graphics card, put it in this bay, connect it over Thunderbolt, and, play games.
Cool.
And it's awesome. So it doesn't use a ton of prop.
I could really use that for my LLM work, to be honest with you. I really could. If I could, snap on an external NVIDIA card and point my LLM work at it.
It's a good time, too. Like, all the crypto phase has sort of died out, and demand is starting to spin up again for these cards. Taiwan can't, or NVIDIA through TSMC in Taiwan can't push out enough. But it's still a lot cheaper than it was a few years ago. And finding them in retail, too. So, yeah, great idea for a, performance boost, I would say.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. This has been an awesome conversation, John. It's nice getting to speak to you after these several years and see your progress with some of these things. I think this is a super interesting space, and you're the type of person that I think is doing it the right way, which is really cool. So I'll be following for sure. Where can folks find you, or what would you like to say to anybody? Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Be curious, be excited, don't be afraid. The other thing is, you just mentioned the crypto craze. I know AI is coming on the heels of a kind of a failed, radical, this is going to change everything, blockchain and NFTs. And I don't want people to immediately think that AI is just yet another pets.com or, phase of craze. It has cooled off a little bit. I'll agree that it's slowed down a little bit, and the hype is, there's a hype cycle around anything. I don't know if that's because people have just become naturally acclimatized so quickly, and we've all adjusted as society to have this tool. Start using it. Start using AI. Go to my Coding with Capo. Go to all the videos that I put out there. I also want to thank everyone. I get a lot of very kind notes and a lot of encouragement. William, just even having me here today has been a lot of fun, and it's nice to agree to connect with you a few years later and see how well you're doing, and see how our journeys have reconnected. I'd love to be back in 6 months or a few months if you need to fill another hour. But people can connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I have started TikTok. I'm not very active on there yet. I don't know if it's the platform for me or not. But we'll see.
I just created a TikTok yesterday and I was lost. I was like, okay, I go to where the people are, go to where everybody is, and wow, it's a different animal for sure. Twitter, I can wrap my head around Twitter. I can wrap my head around LinkedIn and YouTube. TikTok was a different experience so far.
You wrapped it up. Yeah, I sort of felt for the first time in my life, I sort of looked at my phone and had the realization that maybe I'm old and I'm out of touch, and there's a new thing that I'm struggling to figure out, because I see how awesome some of the content is on there, and I go like, how do you make videos like this? That is so cool. And then I fumble around and make, some of them aren't bad, the ones I've done, but they're not. Some of them are like actually entertaining clips of media. I don't know. I think it's very, very impressive what certain people have done on TikTok.
Yeah, if you're gonna, boost or kind of like inject learning into that whole thing,
right?
Wow, learning for fun.
Yeah,
can't beat that. All right, well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate the time. This has been a great conversation, and you have a good rest of your weekend.
All right, thanks a lot, William. I appreciate you having me on, and best of luck with the show. And I'm really happy to be a part of it.